Latter-day Contemplation is a podcast hosted by two Latter-day Saints who have found great value in experiencing God through walking a path of contemplation. The views expressed herein are our own.
Hello and welcome to Latter-day Contemplation. We're your hosts, Christopher Hurtado
And Riley Risto.
Latter-day Contemplation started as an exploration of contemplative practices from many traditions to enhance our discipleship of Jesus Christ. We're by no means experts in the topics we discuss, but what we have is an openness to questions, a hunger to discover truth wherever we can find it, and a desire to share in the transformative life of inner peace. We love that you've joined us, and we hope that you find value in this community.
Welcome back to Latter-day Contemplation. I'm Riley Risto.
And I'm Christopher Hurtado.
So Chris, we've been talking about doing this cool week of contemplative practices that we hope will continue on. But as we've discussed how we're going to do this and structure it for the listener, one of the things I mentioned is that probably the most common question that I get from people who know I'm into this contemplative lifestyle is, where do I begin? Where do I begin with meditation? Where do I begin with shadow work? Where do I begin with contemplative prayer? So on and so forth. And in the last just 2 weeks, I've actually had two separate people ask me this same question via text message. One was a member of my elders quorum, who I made a comment about meditation or something like that in quorum. And right afterward, he texted me. He's like, hey, how do I begin? I need to get started, all this. And the other one was a very close friend of mine who I stayed with a couple weekends back, and we had one of those awesome, deep conversations that you love to have. And he followed up a week later with, hey, how do I begin meditation and shadow work and, all that stuff? And so it's always, okay, first of all, let me preface this by saying there's a ton of practices that can be considered contemplative. There's a ton of meditation modalities. There's many ways to unveil your shadow and do shadow work. So many, right? And so giving one that is the same to every person, it's not treating people like individuals. And so rather than try to guess which one's going to work best for my friends or whoever asks me, I usually just say the best place to begin is with nothing. It's with nothingness. It's with complete stillness, emptiness, with no familiarity of practice. And just, if you can get comfortable just sitting by yourself.
No phone,
no distractions. If you can get comfortable sitting with yourself for 20 minutes.
in silence.
I think that's the beginning of all contemplative practice.
Yeah, in silence, right?
In silence.
In stillness and silence alone. Or at least not interacting. Because you can have someone join you, right?
Yeah, obviously, I think ideally would be alone, because that will help to reveal some of those things that I just mentioned. It'll bring to mind things that you'll hear within your own psyche. It'll allow you to key in on your autonomic bodily processes, your breathing, your pulse, and I just think it's better. So that's my thing. I think alone and stillness.
I can imagine, sitting with someone else, practicing together, eyes closed, not interacting, and yet their presence still be felt in a way that's somehow
I've done that.
Distracting, right?
Yep. I've done that exact thing, and that's great. You actually can feel their presence. A lot of times you can hear them breathing, and just a slight rustle of their motions, even though your eyes are closed, you can sense a lot of that stuff. And that's all instructive. That can be great. I just think if you're starting out and you don't know where to begin, start there. Start in stillness, start in silence, start in solitude, and see what that does for you. And that will open up so many doors. And the reason why this is brought up in the context of this conversation is because we're going to talk about various habits that we want to start implementing, contemplative habits, and we're going to commit to doing some of these for a week, maybe longer, hopefully longer, and just see what it does for us, and then talk to you, the listener, about those and our experiences with those over the course of the next however long. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
So solitude, stillness, and silence. That's the starting place. Find a comfortable place. So this means I don't have to know how to meditate. I don't have to know how to breathe. I don't have to know how to deal with thoughts that come up. I just be, right?
Yeah, love it. You don't have to know how to breathe because your body does it by itself.
So I just have to notice that I'm breathing.
Yeah.
That's the beginning, right? Just notice how you're breathing.
And when you do notice it, when you're keyed into it and you do notice it, it changes. When you're not thinking about it, when you're not focused and contemplative about your breathing, that's the autonomic breathing, and that's survival mode. Your body will just take in what it needs to survive. It's baseline. Most people's lungs don't actually take in more than about 25% of its capacity just during that survival mode.
I can already hear the listener saying, so I should start breathing more deeply. Hey, listen, we're not saying that. You can. Just sit in solitude, in silence, in stillness, and breathe and notice. Contemplation means noticing. Just notice whatever there is to notice.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. That's the basics.
Well, that was a short episode, Riley.
Honestly, if the listener wants to turn off right now, go ahead. Just go do it.
Try that, yeah.
That's fine. But we are going to talk a little bit about some of these other practices, these rituals that we hope will become habitual. And so let's do that. And as we were talking pre-show, one of the things that I mentioned that I've been doing for the last 3 days since my son bought this cold plunge tub is we put one out in the backyard on the back deck on top of 4 or 5 feet of snow, whatever we have back there. And we filled that up, and we've been cold plunging in the morning. Normally, I've been doing cold showers for probably 6 years now, mixing in some cold baths. But it is a different beast to walk outside when it's 7 degrees and get into a tub that has 2 inches of ice on top, break through that, and that is a different beast.
The water temperature you said was 34 degrees, right?
Yeah, we measured it at 34, just under the ice, and yeah, that's different. But it's been great. I'll sit in there for a couple of minutes and dip my head under, and the main thing I'm trying to do is the same thing that we just recommended that people do in silence, is sit there and not be bothered by the cold as much as possible. Try to push that out of my brain a little bit and discipline myself to have as little reaction as possible physically to the cold, so that I can notice what else is going on with my body, which is my breathing picks way up, way a lot faster. And so rather than hyperventilate, I slow down my breathing but make the breaths deeper. And this is all going into obviously a method that everyone, big chunk of people anyway, are very familiar with, the Wim Hof method. And maybe we'll do a whole episode on that at some point. But it's something that I've been practicing for that 6 years that I've been doing the cold showers and cold baths. Anyway, the noticing of your bodily processes is really important. That's a contemplative practice. And so that's why it's been so easy for me to continue doing that during this period of my life when I'm into contemplation.
I've noticed in my reading, that people like Jesus of Nazareth and Ram Dass's guru in India, they can even notice other people's bodily and maybe even mental processes. Right? That this is a fruit of contemplative living.
Yeah, that's a level that I can't say I'm there at yet, but I have done some meditation with friends in their presence where we sit in stillness and silence and breathe, and even with eyes closed and as much quiet as you can get, you can still sense the other person there. You can sense their movements, and sometimes you can hear their breathing. So yeah, there's something to that for sure.
So there are different practices, right? This isn't all about cold showers, but I haven't been taking cold showers as long as you have, Riley. I started during the summer when they weren't even that cold here in California, and I could go outside and it's still not as cold as it is where you live. But there's different ways to do this, and so I think, speaking in terms of principles, you can just start by trying something, right? My wife wasn't willing to get in a cold shower, but she was willing to turn up the water or turn down the temperature as she finished her shower, maybe finish with a cold shower. I started in the summer and I did that on purpose. I thought, hey, if I start getting used to this cold water that comes out of here in the summer in California, then when the cold water in the winter comes out, I will have been the proverbial frog cooking in this pot for the last 6 months, right? And getting used to colder and colder showers. And that worked for me.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, I watched this Netflix documentary that is on a therapist I don't know what his real name is, but the nickname that they use as the title for the show is Stutz. It's Jonah Hill's therapist. And I've been recommending it to people because there's some really good tools in there. And one of the things that he uses as a tool is this idea that you've just shared, which is just do something. And he uses a metaphor of a necklace. He says, say you've got this beaded necklace. All the beads are the same shape and size. And every time you take an action, you add another bead to the necklace. And you don't have to compare. It's not a competition. It's not, good, better, best or anything. It's like, I'm just going to take an action, and that action represents a bead. And pretty soon you've got a necklace. And I love that metaphor because it seems like, for me, I understand that to say that there's priority and importance to action over and above the value that those actions provide. And so that's what we're going to kind of do this week. And you may be thinking, as we name some of these ideas that we have that we're going to try, these contemplative practices and whatnot, you may say, well, I can't do that, or that's just too much for me. But what we're trying to say is incrementalism is okay. It's still an action. If you take a small incremental action, put another bead on your necklace, and then take another action later. And so it's all about just kind of putting one foot in front of the other and not trying to make great strides necessarily, but do something that's just slightly uncomfortable and just see how that feels and build on it.
Yeah, and you're listening to a couple of guys who really go for cold turkey, right? Riley, you and I both, by personality, by character, by our way of being, we go cold turkey, and yet I didn't do that with my cold showers. And actually, if I tell the full story, I started doing the gradual thing, and it didn't work out. It's not that I really did as I think back, I didn't get used to it and get more into it. No, I just quit, and then I went cold turkey in the winter. So that's the whole truth.
Well, I mean, and that's how I am. That's how my dad is. My dad's a cold turkey guy. He used to smoke for 20 something years. And I remember I'm maybe 10 years old and he just says, I'm done smoking. And that was it. He never put a cigarette in his mouth again. And my mom, who was also a smoker growing up as a kid, she tried to quit 6 or 7 times. One time she quit for a full 2 years and went back to it. And so she's not a cold turkey person. And the only thing that worked for her was sort of like a change of mindset. She did the hypnotism, but that's that's off subject. Anyway, but that's kind of the way I do things. Maybe that's an inheritance of my dad. I don't know, but I'm a cold turkey guy all the way.
I quit smoking the same way. I made several false attempts, and then one day I just said I don't smoke anymore. That was after 20 years of smoking and several failed attempts. I just quit, and I just never thought about it again. And then again, so again, if we dig deeper, what did I do next? I didn't have to do it this way. I did quit smoking cigarettes for good. Cigars were all the rage. I actually started smoking a pipe, but that was just weird at 20 something. I didn't fit in. So then cigars were in style, so I did that. And then I just, that was more of this is what everybody's doing. And that's how I got into smoking cigarettes in the first place. So thankfully I let that go too.
Well, Chris, let's get into the meat of this a little bit. So here's some ideas that we've been bouncing around to each other of things that we want to try to do during this week of contemplative practices. And so some of the things I've written down, at least to kind of start my day, would be a morning prayer and meditation. I'm typically a 20-minute guy, but whatever works for you. I wouldn't put any constraints on that. And many times I'll do my meditation when I get to my office because then I can do it quietly and I'm not surrounded by the whole family. I know that's a luxury that some people don't have, and that's okay.
Let me say a couple of things about that, Riley, because first of all, I know you're about to go into a whole morning routine and habit stacking, and I believe in that. I don't know that it's for everyone, right? You and I would agree, but I don't know that's for everyone. So as you listen, just pick one thing. Pick more than one thing if you want to, but at least pick one thing and try it, right? And then, by the way, same thing with the length of if you're going to do something like sitting in silence, when you say meditation, that starts to feel like I have to know what I'm doing again, Riley. So I'm just going to sit in silence, in stillness, in solitude. For you say 20 minutes, I say, how about 5 minutes? It's a start. It's funny because I actually practice meditation where I go 20, 25 minutes twice a day. And yet when I sit to take my blood pressure, I'm impatient about the 15 minutes that takes. I'm supposed to sit there still and quiet and take my blood pressure.
Well, and I want to be clear that there's no judgment about this. Again, this is just a bead. It's just an action on the necklace, right? I had a woman at one time who's a mother, and she said, how do you possibly find 20 minutes of stillness and silence in your life? And I'm like, I admit I am privileged that way. I have a job where I work solo in an office, and there's nothing around me. But I said, can you find 1 minute? literally 1 minute. And then we broke it down even further. I remember I told you about this, Chris, and you said, well, what about one breath?
One breath, that's all it takes. Yeah. One breath that you notice, a breath that's intentional that you notice. That's contemplation.
Yeah, one breath is a meditation for sure. So let's take the stigma away from it and let's take the intimidation out of it and just say, do it. Sit in stillness, silence, solitude for whatever time that you have available to you and just notice it. See what it does for you.
One more comment before you go back into your routine, right? Because I think I know where you're going with this. So we believe in stacking habits, right? We talked about atomic habits. We did an episode on that. It really helps to think in terms of a morning routine and evening routine. This episode's doing a lot, right, at this point. But the focus really is, here's a list of ideas and pick one and try it. So what are some more ideas, Riley?
Very basic. So when you wake up from a night of sleep, something that's been told to me years and years ago that I haven't always applied this, but I have for the last couple of years, and it just puts me in the right mindset for what I want to do with my day as far as organization and adding a sense of order to it is just simply make the bed.
I've heard so many things about this, and I've done it too. I do it for my wife, and then now I should say I started doing it for my wife. Now I find I do it for myself. There's a guy who wrote a whole book on this. He's an ex-military guy or a military guy, wrote a book about making your bed.
I saw some speech that he gave. I think it was a commencement ceremony at some college or something like that. And he basically said, start your day with that and it'll change your life, you know?
Yeah, they turned it into a book too. Yeah, that's a great practice. How about, let me back up one. What if I left my phone in another room? Because, a lot of us, what we do first thing is pick up our phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're faced with whatever it is that somebody else wants to put in front of you. What if instead I picked up a favorite quote or opened up my scriptures? I mean, these are just ideas, right? There's so many ideas.
No, these are great. These are great. And it was right along the line of where I wanted to go with this. Like, instead of starting your day randomly, start it with intention. And I think intention will set the course for the rest of your day. So if you were to do, and you don't have to, again, don't stack these if you don't want to, if it feels intimidating. But like, if you were to do this, if you were to wake up, have a prayer of gratitude for the sleep that you just received, sit there for a moment in silence and just receive.
Maybe take some deep breaths.
Take a few breaths to start your day. Why not? Make your bed and then go about your day. If you were to do just those things, I think your day would start grand.
There's not even a cold shower in there. Just those few things, right?
Not yet.
Yeah. I like it.
So yeah, what I've been doing for the last few days is I've been doing those things and then running over to the cold plunge in the backyard and sitting in that for 2 minutes, and that becomes my stillness for sure. I'm outside. When I did it this morning, I showed you the video. You heard the audio of the birds chirping.
Oh yeah.
That was magical.
Oh yeah.
And that took my mind off the cold to some extent, and I could notice some things that were going on around me, which was awesome.
Riley, I just read a book on forest bathing from one of the foremost experts on this from Japan. And I have a lot of experience of spending a lot of time when I was younger I've said this before, on the East Coast of the United States, in the woods, down in South America, in the tropical rainforest. I got so much benefit from that. I get curious to know what's behind that. And I found out that, hey, there really is a benefit to this. There's so many things to it that I didn't even realize, and that you can get some of these benefits just having plants in your house, just diffusing essential oils, go for a walk in the woods. There's so many ways that you can do this, right? I like to sit sometimes at the kitchen counter near the plant, just be close to a plant, a single plant. And I'll reach out and I'll touch the dirt with my fingers. I'll go to the end of the driveway and crouch and pick up a stick and play in the dirt. And it's so calming and soothing and just...
It's like a Zen garden.
I feel like I'm connecting with nature, yeah. How about going barefoot? Just spending a few minutes barefoot outside, grounding yourself. So you've gotten us sort of launched into a day that starts in a contemplative way. And so then there's, what do you do in between, right? There are other things to do. And then maybe we can talk about an evening routine too, and some ideas for an evening routine.
Well, let me just offer this as sort of the beginning to the middle of your day, all right? We spend so much of our time, and we had an episode on this called contemplative consumption. We spend a lot of our day thinking about what we're going to eat and what time we're going to eat and with whom and whatnot. So this is, if you're a breakfast eater, maybe you go from this beginning of your day with prayer, meditation, whatever, if you decide to follow along with that, and you move into the phase of your day where like, okay, I'm ready to energize and take on the day. And so I'm a breakfast eater. I like a few eggs, some bacon, a little toast, and a small glass of milk. That's my breakfast. And I think I could spend more time, not necessarily time in terms of like the amount of time, but put more attention into the cooking of that, the smelling of it, the tasting of it, the chewing of it, thinking about the source of it and what it does for me, for the planet, for whatever. So I'm going to include that as kind of a launch point to leaving the house would be eating a contemplative breakfast.
I like that too. I'm picking up Thich Nhat Hanh vibes.
Yeah.
Right? And he's not the only one, but the idea that when you're washing dishes, wash dishes. When you're eating, eat. So we love to multitask, which by the way is a fallacy because we can't actually multitask. This has been proven, right? You can only switch tasks, which means you're not doing either one of them or more than two if there are more than two well, right? So what if you were to focus? What if you were to notice what it's like to just wash the dishes, to just eat your sandwich or your breakfast or whatever, right? The other thing is, actually, before we go into the rest of the day, I like to start my morning too by journaling. We had a whole episode on that, right? There's several journals that I write in every day as a habit, right?
So I'm not a journal guy, but make this easy for me, Chris.
Yes, sure. So morning pages. How about this one? How about just first thing? They say, some people say, okay, if you're going to meditate, so brush your teeth and sit down and meditate right away. You got us pretty quickly into, a contemplative practice too, first thing in the morning. Another idea is I've heard, you make your herbal tea and you sit down and write in your journal, something like that. So morning pages is one idea. Again, we have a whole episode on this, but morning pages means, this is from Julie Cameron, you're just going to spend a few minutes to write down whatever is on your mind. This is sort of a clearing of the decks. It's finding out what's on your mind. You might not have thought there was anything on your mind until you had to sit down and write about it. So that's one idea, right? Another one is, and this takes us into the rest of the day, you can, because some people think in journaling in terms of I'm making a record for whoever's going to come later and read it. I don't think in those terms. And part of me hopes no one ever reads what I wrote. Part of me feels like, okay, if they do, that's fine. I won't be there. What do I care? But that's not what I'm doing it for. I'm doing it as a contemplative practice. It's about noticing what's going on with me. And my wife was the one who suggested I do this. She said, just write just for you, right? For starters, right? So another one is here's one, write down how you feel at random times of the day. Just have somewhere in your phone or your notebook in your pocket where you just write down how you feel. Now, how you feel is something that shows up in one word. If you have more than one word, that's not how you feel. That's an explanation of how you feel.
So you're saying, Chris, that we should notice how we feel at some points during the day. I got to be honest with you. I probably never do this.
I tried it. It was recommended by a therapist, and I did this for some weeks. And then the second part of this exercise is to then look back and see what you see, to look for patterns.
Well, and I think what it would do for me is just if it includes another phase of contemplation or awareness in my day that's so simple. What if I just chose 3 times during the day, 10 a.m., 2 p.m., 6 or 8 p.m., something like that. And I just said during those 3 times, as soon as the clock strikes 6 or 8 or whatever, I'm going to go to my either phone journal or paper journal or whatever, and I'm going to write down a one-word feeling. This is how I feel right now. One word: depressed, happy, sad, busy, stressed. One word that encapsulates how I feel in that moment. Just being contemplative for that moment might actually change the direction you take the rest of your day, at least up until the next bullet point, right?
Yeah, and you can go further with this, right? I mean, you can write down what was going on that might have made you feel this way, but I'm just saying, just write down how you feel, one word. Maybe set an alarm. You started talking about multiple times a day. I'm doing it at random, but you can also do it by setting an alarm to remind you, right? That's another idea. So going into the day, with your breakfast scenario, you've given us the idea that we can actually do all things in this way. Now, again, it would be really advanced and beyond me to be doing everything in this mindful, contemplative way, but that's what I'm pushing for. That's what I'm hoping for. That's where I hope to land, which, by the way, doesn't mean that there's no possibility of spontaneity. Because the thing about being contemplative, the thing about noticing, is that includes noticing what needs to happen now, here, now, right? When you think about Jesus, we hear so much about teaching in Jesus's way, teaching in the Lord's way, as if there was a way that Jesus teaches. Jesus teaches depending on who he's teaching. Right? The way that he deals with the Pharisees is not the same way he deals with the woman taking an adultery, right? Or the woman at the well. It depends on who he's talking to. Here's someone who has mastered contemplative living, right? Who can be in the moment and notice what needs to happen next. But this is something we can cultivate.
So what if we, instead of committing to some long period of time where we have to notice every little action that we take, what if we just say, for the next hour, I'm going to notice. I'm going to be aware, and I'm going to take note of things that happen or that are going around in my environment, that are going on in my body, in my mind, my spirit. 1 hour. That would be a great practice to have 1 hour each day where you're in noticing mode.
How about that? Whether you wrote it down or not, either way, right? You could take notes about this, right? Field notes, whatever, what's going on. So there's another practice that we could talk about that is something you can carry throughout your day. That if you're not, again, perfect like Jesus or like some guru, right? You could maybe try on ways of being. Okay, this is something I learned from Landmark Education. Ways of being. So today I'm being, and you decide this maybe the night before or the morning of. Today I'm being nothing's wrong. What does that mean? That means no matter what happens, I'm going to be having in mind all day that my response is nothing's wrong. Dad, this happened. Okay. This might not be easy. It might not come natural, and I may not be able to live every day that way, and I may quit at some point during the day because of what just happened. But what if I tried? What if I tried to be nothing's wrong just for a day?
And it's really in the trying. I think the key to this is really in the trying, because as much as the show Yes Man is kind of coming to mind, as much as we think Yes Man forced his hand into saying yes to all these things, it also had some negative things that happened during that day for that character, right? For us, if we just say, well, I'm just going to try to be nothing's wrong this day, or I'm going to try to be accommodating, or whatever adverb adjective you want to add to this dot 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 line, fill in the blank, and just try and see if that changes your day. And again, noticing is the key to the change, because if you notice that there is a change and it's a positive change, it's something you will have a desire to do again.
And I'm going to suggest, as every meditation teacher will tell you, as you're trying, if you notice that you failed, don't beat yourself up. Just go back to trying again. So what if I don't have 2 hours every day to spend in the forest, or I don't even have a forest nearby? Can I take a walk during my lunch hour in the park or in the neighborhood, somewhere where there are trees? I've noticed that even just passing by the trees in the neighbor's yard as I walk down the sidewalk has benefits. Just being close to the trees, closer than I am inside my house. We spend a lot of time indoors, right? Just getting outside. What if I were to take off my shoes and go walk around in my own backyard? Sometimes I see the oranges on the tree in the backyard, and there's something about the green and the orange together that just speaks to me, and I just stand at the window and stare. What if I went outside and took off my shoes and walked through the grass barefoot and touched the leaves, or picked an orange and ate it, right? And gratitude. Again, there's so many things that you can do, and it's just about doing things with intent, noticing how you feel, noticing what's going on around you. Do I hear the birds? Do I feel the sun? Do I see the tree? Do I taste the orange? All of this, right?
So I know I mentioned early on, and the importance of stillness, silence, and solitude, and just sitting in that as the beginning of all contemplative practice. There may be some people out there who are more of the mindset of like, give me the instructions. Okay, so here's one. Use the Lectio Divina model for 1 day. Try that. Try that for a week, whatever is comfortable for you. But the Lectio Divina model, as I've outlined in prior episodes, and I've got the group on Facebook, but it's basically this. It's 4 or 5, depending on which one you ascribe to, contemplative actions stacked into one practice. And if you were to make this ritual a habitual practice, I think it would make a big difference in your life. So the beginning is just read a scripture. As soon as something jumps out to you, stop, meditate, pray to invite the Spirit, invite God's influence in this process. Contemplate, which means noticing, awareness, sitting with it. And then the last one, if you use this last one, which I think you should, it's take action based on what you learned. Those 4 or 5 steps, there's a practice.
One of those steps was meditate. Did you mean in this context pondering the verse? You're not talking about going into some kind of 20-minute meditation, right?
No, the thing that you stopped reading for, the thing that caught your attention and kind of is the thing that should become the point of your meditation. It becomes your mantra. So if it was a single word, take that word as your mantra and ponder it, meditate over it, and do that for a few minutes, whatever you have available, until you feel like you've gained something from that. And it may be no particular insight. Maybe it's a feeling, and maybe it has nothing to do with the word, and that's okay too. So moving on from that, of course, then the prayer, and it can be a simple prayer of gratitude. Thank you for this moment. And then moving on to sitting with it, being aware, and contemplating this whole experience.
One of the things that stands out to me about this practice is you're not necessarily reading that long. Not only that, but you're reading for what speaks to you, right? So, and when you find that, well, then there's no more to read. You're not reading just to read, right? We've been told for years, as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, to read one verse, to read 5 minutes, right? This is the same principle that we're dealing with here, right? The idea that you just do something, one breath, one verse. If you spend 5 minutes, great. If you spend 20 minutes later, great. But one breath that you pay attention to is a meditation. One verse that you read that speaks to you, when you let it speak to you, when you ponder it, when you extract from it some principle that you can act on, can make all the difference.
Well, it's quite likely that this mode of studying, if you want to call it that, scriptures, will be of more benefit to you than hours of reading.
This reminds me of something else. When I was a Boy Scout, as a boy, I had a good turn coin that I bought at the Scout store in America. This is very American, right? To have all the products. We didn't have that in South America where I started off as a Scout. But you can use a coin, any coin, whatever, a stick, something in your pocket that says, I haven't done my good turn yet. Because if I had, it would be in the other pocket. And you look for a chance to do a good turn. You notice, right? It helps you notice. If I have in mind that I have this good turn to do daily, then I'm looking out for opportunities. This puts me in a contemplative mindset. I'm in a mindset of noticing who needs assistance, right? Whether it's the proverbial, helping the elderly woman across the street or whatever, right? Stepping in and taking over and doing the dishes.
Yeah, this is like the string you tie around your finger to remind you of something, or the talisman you wear around your neck to remind you of something, maybe a core memory or an important person. Kind of the same thing. If you can adopt something that helps you to remember these practices, that's all the better.
Which reminds me of my Streaks app on my phone. There's something about Streaks that just motivates me. By the way, if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. Also, I noticed that as much as I love keeping my streaks, I've learned that Sunday, 2 days ago, I was a busy day and I lost some streaks and I just bead with my kids. And we watched a movie together and I knew I wasn't doing those things. And the next day, the streaks are gone. There were something like, I don't know how many days. I'm not even going to say. Who cares? There was a lot of days. And I just said, you know what? Today's day 1. As a matter of fact, I'm looking into, does my Streak app have a streak freeze option? Because I learned this whole streak idea from Duolingo where I can miss 2 days and keep my streak. So if my app has that, I'll probably take advantage of it. Then I can keep my streak. But I've also learned it's okay because today's always day 1. I'm still motivated. It's still a list of things to do every day. In my Streaks app, I have things like my daily meditation, morning and evening, my cold shower, drinking water, exercising, all of these things.
Well, you just named a few more practices that anyone can incorporate into their day that would have an improvement on their life. Chris, I think at this point we've communicated the point of this thing. And we might be taking up someone's time where they can start implementing this practice. I mean, maybe they're listening for an hour like they normally do, What if we say, hey, we're okay with 40 minutes here, and we give people 20 minutes extra to start putting this into practice?
Yeah, start now. There's no time like the present. Pick one, do it. As in coming weeks, we'll be talking about other practices that maybe we haven't mentioned them here today. Maybe we have. Let's pick one, Riley, you and me, and let's do it.
I love it. I'm gonna. You had the suggestion in our little text back and forth to do the journaling, and that's the one I'm gonna pick. And I know that's something you do already. Was there any that I named?
Well, it just so happens that I'm off the wagon. I lost my streak.
Oh, there you go.
I fell behind in my reading goal, and I spent a week catching up by not writing and reading more. And what I'd like to do is get back to reading every day and writing every day. So let's do it.
Okay, mine's going to be really simple. I'm going to do the 3 times during the day, the bullet point journaling where I just say how I feel. That's my start. I'm going to incrementalize into that this way because I'm not a journaler. And I don't know that I want to now dedicate an hour of my life to journaling like hardcore. But I know I can do that. I know I can do 3 times during the day, just noticing and writing down how I feel in a single word. That's cake. I'm going to do that.
And I've only been doing that as I journal in the morning. It's part of the template that I use. So I'm going to do what you're doing. I'm just going to do it 3 times a day instead.
Awesome. Well, Chris, let's wrap this one up. I do want to say, if you're going to take this challenge, to you, the listener, to the audience, if you're going to take this challenge, please, please, please let us know how it's going. If you're doing it for a day, if you're doing it for a week, if you're going to commit to it for a longer term, great. Let us know how it's going. Please check in with us. Tell us how the show has helped you. Tell us what you'd like us to talk about. Give us ideas. We are so open to it. We've said this many times. We're reachable with Facebook Messenger. We've got some Google Juice. You can hit us on our Facebook pages, Latter-day Peace Studies.
My phone number's out there. My email's out there.
So that's it. Yeah, get in touch with us. Yeah.
I prefer text messages, Facebook Messenger messages. Yeah, but reach out. And we have heard so many positive things from you. Thank you for reaching out, and please continue to do so. Thanks also to our volunteers. Latter-day Peace Studies is an all-volunteer effort. So thanks to everyone who plays a part in this, whether it's editing the podcast, us recording it, somebody else promoting it on social media, etc. Thank you all. And please consider, participating at whatever level you feel comfortable. You can donate. It's tax deductible. You can volunteer. You can just follow along and just reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for Latter-day Contemplation. I'm Riley Risto.
And I'm Christopher Hurtado.
Have a great week.